Our next item on the agenda is standards and review update. And I know Danielle and Molly, that's very brief. Yeah.
I feel like you guys need a stretch break.
I need a restroom break. Does anyone else need a quick restroom break? Yeah, let's just do a really quick restroom break if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
I would love it. Let's come back in about 6 minutes. Restroom, come back. We are back.
Okay. All right.
Standards review update, please.
Absolutely. So the first couple of these slides are genuinely just for review. You've seen them before, but I always want to be cognizant of our audience may have not been here in the past. So this is just reminding everybody that through 1427, the State Board of Education was tasked with adopting college and career readiness standards, with the basis of that comprehensive evaluation being the Common Core standards to start. And then our goal is by July 1st to adopt college and career readiness educational standards. So I'm only going to talk about where we've been since we've last been together. It feels like a lot has been happening every single time between meetings with the standards evaluation process. But since we were last before you, the evaluation panel came back together on March 12th and 13th. In that time they came together, they were essentially working on what we would consider about a draft 2.5, if you will, meaning everything has been continued to evolve as we receive feedback. So on the 12th and the 13th, they continued to use the 2066 online comments that came back in from the field on the standards. They also were using the public hearing feedback, and they were using just their own work around articulation and integration that I described before. The idea of the level of knowledge, the level of practice standards versus mastery standards at every grade level. They continued to look for gaps. So that's what they did on those 2 days with each other. And that was, again, the evaluation teams, evaluation panels. I think overall you've heard many times us talk about the 2066, but correct me if I'm wrong if you've seen this slide or not seen this slide. This is the breakdown of the type of comments that were received. So I thought this might be helpful for you to see just overall what kind of specific feedback. And remember, that was most important to both the evaluation and the College and Career Ready panel, was the specific comments. So you can see in K-5 ELA, there were 783 comments. I can tell you about 400 of those were specific to cursive handwriting. That's why that number is elevated over the others. Then in math, there were 483. 612 ELA 94, 6-8 math 99, 912 math 91, and general overall comments. I just want to give you an example of what that means so you understand why they came out in this general category. These were everything from we love it, we don't like it, there were too many snow days this year, what are you doing about food lunches? I mean, it was just people who wanted to talk to us at the Department of Education. So they were just very general comments. Also, since we've last been together, we've mentioned to you in the past that many different outside experts outside of Indiana were invited to inform the process and look at our drafts. So since we've last been together, all of the persons listed have given feedback that are informing our process. The feedback we've received has been used by the College and Career Ready panel when they've been together both a week and a half ago and then coming together again this Friday. And you can see listed the institutions for where they represent, as well as the standards they provided feedback on, and whether they did it pre-articulation or post-articulation. Most people listed here said, wait, we'd like to wait till the drafts have been further narrowed down, with the exception of Kathleen Porter McGee. She did do a pre-articulation for ELA and math. And then there's a star next to Dr. Stotsky's evaluation, because I don't want to misstate this, but she was somewhat back and forth on whether she was going to do a formal analysis. And then we recently learned, and she submitted something to the governor, where she hosted a session at IU Bloomington with a group of literacy teachers, and she offered up the draft for them to provide feedback. So she sent some feedback to us, but I don't know that I would call it an evaluation that was hers as much as it was those group of teachers that came together. Anything, Molly, to add to that on this slide that I may have not captured? And I guess I want to say on this before we move on, and Molly can talk too, is this idea of when this feedback has come in and it's gone to the College and Career Ready panel and the evaluation team for them to include in their work, there has been some great feedback for which we've incorporated. And then there's been some feedback for which we said, you know what? Indiana teachers, we talked about this. This was not something that we felt. So some things were, if you will, taken into consideration, but then not included in the draft changes. And some examples of that.
I can give some specific examples. So some pieces of feedback that have been, and I'll speak to ELA a little bit more, universally recommended actually by every evaluator who looked at ELA was having examples of text that that teachers could look to, and that's something we've all talked about, and that's something that we will be adding in a reference document that's associated with the standards. We're kind of excited about that. We're actually planning on reaching out to the school districts and getting feedback. So that's been an area that's been highly discussed and really universally recommended. In addition, some recommendations that have been made that have been incorporated by the panels, especially when comments were made by evaluators that this is not clear or this would not be understandable to the general public. A lot of work has been done to try to clear up and make the language clearer. In contrast, there have been some suggestions that were recommended by an evaluator that were discussed by the evaluation teams and the CCR panels, and there was disagreement by the panels. For example, a recommendation was made by one evaluator that the entire strand of print concepts in reading foundational skills should be eliminated because all students, when they come to kindergarten, know their letters and know the concepts of print. The evaluation teams felt very strongly that that is not true, especially in Indiana with kindergarten not being mandatory. They felt that it was very, very important to include that. So the feedback has been really, really valuable. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples.
Thank you for that. Those were good. So as you can imagine, those are quite hefty in ideas, and I can tell you that we have done a great deal of, I guess, delving into them, not just at our own level, but within, like I said, the evaluation of the College Career team. We have also re-engaged with Suji Shin, who you met back earlier in this process. She is accepting for all of us all these outside evaluations, and she's going to come before you and before the roundtable with a synthesis of all of those. And furthermore, talk about, okay, within all of these, this was a theme. This is how Indiana handled that theme. So therefore, this is across the board, was in all of these analyses, or analysi, I suppose. This is how, what is it? Right, yeah. Anyway, this is how Indiana's team and process has handled these situations. So that will should certainly help this process and help you as well.
Oh, yes, sorry. Go ahead, Andrea.
Well, I have some concern about relying on Susie Shin to synthesize the evaluations of the 5 experts that the state contracted with in terms of just her perspective. I mean, we know that she's affiliated with an organization that's been very involved in Common Core implementation. I would much prefer to have the 5 contracted experts come themselves and synthesize their own evaluation rather than count on some third party to do that for them.
You can go ahead and respond on how that process is going to work with Suji Shin.
Well, I guess it just kind of goes back to what we just said. We feel very strongly about our Indiana process, and while we welcomed their feedback, it was still up to the Indiana team and the Indiana process and the Indiana Education Roundtable and you all to allow for this process to take into consideration their feedback. Because it's feedback. And so just like the example Molly gave, some of it made a lot of sense for Indiana and Indiana educators. Other parts of their feedback did not, in our opinion, as an Indiana educator.
So what exactly is Suji Shin going to do?
She's just going to kind of, again, put together a way, what were the themes found across all of them in mathematics? Okay. What was found in all of them in English language arts. She's not giving comment on pro or con, okay, but rather just helping us kind of put together. So again, just and
what we decided to do with it.
And what we decided to do with it. How we, how we integrated those thoughts.
Sorry.
And I also wanted to mention too, Andrea, the actual reports by each of those persons will be provided at a certain time as well, with this too.
Actually, that leads me to suggest that the sooner we get those reports released to the public, the better, so that people can read them for themselves and not rely on the synthesis of an outside expert. So I'd like to suggest that we should get those reports out there today to as many people as possible.
We actually were waiting until after the College and Career Ready panel came together Friday so they could come out at the same time as the final draft. So you could see how the work was included or not included.
And I'll just make a comment regarding Indiana's standards. Indiana is responsible for our standards, and we have engaged experts, and we've engaged experts in all kinds of processes that we do here in the state of Indiana. But at the end of the day, they're our standards. It's what we decide that we're going to do. We've got a pretty extensive evaluation portion going on, and whereby we're going to pay attention to what experts might say. At the end of the day, it's Indiana. It's going to have their own standards. And so I don't want to have anybody go away with the feeling that Indiana needs to accept particular experts' opinions in any way, shape, or form. They are made for feedback, their input to us, just like the 2,000-some comments that we got from stakeholders, just like the hearings that we did, just like the, all the other aspects that we've had in place on our panels and our evaluation teams. I just want to reiterate, Indiana is going to have its own college and career ready assessments, and things may inform us, and we need to be knowledgeable of them, and we may take action on them, but at the end of the day, it's us that will make those decisions.
I think that's an excellent point, Superintendent. I like how you put those all in the same category. All those bodies of evidence, the 2,066 voices, the 100 at the hearings, the 5 experts have all continued to, integrate into our process in an equal way. So I think that's really important.
Oh, Gordon?
I'd like to comment on the process and really, start by echoing Dr. Oliver's comments that started off our meeting. And I know we're not concluded with the process, but I just want to say and go on record for, praising the way this process has gone under very difficult circumstances. We've gone through this process, which I think has been helpful because it's brought a number of different viewpoints to the table. I believe we're about to come up with a set of standards that will ensure Hoosier students are ready for success in the real world. That said, it's been unfortunate from my perspective that this whole discussion has been guided not by what will prepare our students for success, but what words we use to describe those standards. We can debate and have debated what standards are best for our students and how those standards align nationally, but it's disturbing to me as a business person that there are folks who have chimed in during this debate to say that our kids don't need to be taught certain standards, or that it doesn't matter if Indiana is off kilter with the rest of the nation and world. It's been almost a decade since the world is flat entered our lexicon as a way to describe the global economy. That was before we had iPhones and before we had Facebook, by the way. And it's only gotten flatter in that time. If I'm hiring someone from Indiana and California, I need to be reasonably assured that that person is competent in certain areas and prepared to work across state lines with a basic set of skills. And if Indiana wants to recruit employers here, they need to know that our students are graduating from high school and going either into the workforce or on to higher education taught to a certain set of standards. Again, I am assured that the standards that we're discussing today and will be before us in coming weeks will keep Indiana competitive. But I did want to offer my 2 cents from a business perspective about this debate. Again, I'm pleased with the process, and I'm confident that we'll end up in the right place with Hoosier standards.
Thank you. Any other comments? Andrea?
So I just want to get back to my point about the 5 national experts. The state contracted with 5 people to evaluate draft number 2. They came back with an enormous amount of suggestions for how to improve draft number 2. Stanford mathematician James Milgram, for example, had comments on virtually every single standard in K-8 in high school. Professor Wu from Berkeley said the high school standards were far from ready for prime time. And the errors they pointed out are not the kind that can be cleaned up overnight. And in fact, the corrections themselves need the same scrutiny that we're giving all of the individual standards from the get-go. And so what I'm suggesting is, rather than wait and see what the experts said was wrong with the standards after it's too late, we need to see the expert evaluations now. So when we get draft 3, we can on our own look and make sure that the errors, particularly in mathematics, so I certainly don't want mathematics errors in our standards, have been cleaned up properly. And so what I'm suggesting is we need to get the expert reports out now. By the time we get them, they will be commenting on a draft that is no longer in play.
But you will, and the goal will be the draft you will see will have taken into consideration what you're determining as errors, because we hope to get out to you by the 16th, which is next Wednesday. The College and Career Ready panel is coming back together this Friday because they've been working off those experts' feedback. And frankly, they've been working overnight, and they've been working overnight for months now, every time feedback comes in, to continue to use that to guide the draft. So we'd like to give them this Friday to finish their process. This is the College and Career Ready panel. This is the second time, and in some cases they've met in WebEx format between these last 2 sessions. Take into consideration all of the feedback that's come in. We just received, I think, the last one as recently as late last week. And then give you the final draft as well as their reports by next Wednesday, the 16th, in the entirety.
And it's a very short turnaround because the roundtable acts on the 21st. A very short turnaround to figure out if the corrections have been made properly.
I think it's going to be very evident that the corrections, when appropriate, are made.
Well, Andrea, we're already making them.
Yeah, they're going to.
We're already doing that. We're in the midst of doing it, and it will be finished on Friday.
Correct.
Yes. Brad?
We haven't seen them.
You'll see them side by side. You'll have seen them being made, have been made.
Just a suggestion, since the last time we'll see before these things wrap up and the final drafts out. One of the takeaways from the public hearing that looking back at it, you always think, how can you improve it? When that final draft comes out, if there's an introduction that kind of captures some of what you already have out on the website in terms of the process and the fact we looked at multiple standards, the fact we're looking for clarity, specificity, if we could have something like that as a preamble to the standards themselves for both language arts and math, I think that'll help, because one of the constant things I think we've been wrestling with is people who just looked at the standards and had to draw their own conclusions because they got all that information, even though we provided it. But I think it has to actually be this time in the actual draft. I mean, like right up front, so they see that.
Sure, no, it's a great suggestion.
That'll help them.
Yep, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Okay, I think we're, Tony?
I just want to be clear. Is there going to be another point for, say, board members to have any input into any of the standards? I just feel as though this whole process happened somewhere else with someone else, and I'm not sure that, and I know people are opinionated on the board, but I'm not sure that we've ever really had a good airing or discussion about any of the specific standards that are being considered. I think Gordon raised a good point that most of the discussion about this has been about word usage without a lot of discussion about what is it that kids really need to know how to do in the 21st century with a diploma. I mean, what are the anchor standards? Sure. What is it that we're going toward? I don't feel as though there's been any discussion at this level about that, really. There's some things that, personally, I believe from a business perspective should be in there. They may not be traditional academic standards, but like collaboration, being able to collaborate and work together, cultural fluency, foreign languages. I mean, these are real skill sets that are becoming increasingly important, and I don't know if I've seen them, or if I read it, I don't know that I read it, but is there ever going to be a point where we get to add anything before it's put to a vote?
Sure, it's a great question, and I don't know, Superintendent, if you want to address that, but as I understand our process in Indiana, the roundtable will make a recommendation to you. The opportunity for you to have given comment in a specific standard, I think, would have been the same along this process as any person has done so to the educators doing the work. So the drafts have been provided, they've been up for online comment. I think that would have been an opportunity as an individual, because your opinion of, in my opinion, your opinion of as an individual is as strong as mine. And that's how I would give my input. But we have trusted this process to Indiana educators, college and career readiness people, by our decision of who we've appointed to do this work.
So who's trusted this process to those people? I mean, I haven't. Okay, and as far as I know, I'm going to be asked to vote on it.
Sure.
I'll pretty much tell you right now, So I'm just saying, it's something missing. here. I think in general.
I'm sorry that you've, I guess, have given the draft.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Are we
but,
getting, is there another draft going to the board?
Next week by the 16th.
All right, so on the 16th, you're going to get your third draft.
Okay.
So to look at.
Yes, and comments would be great.
Oh, Dan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just very briefly, we'll get the next draft.
Right. Which we hope is his finals.
Yeah, I'll be present at the round table as a member, superintendent. I don't know if there's anybody else, but please read, look for any comments or ideas you have, and it isn't a perfect process. I wish we weren't in this situation, frankly. Almost long for the days of the Common Core. It was quite a journey here, but we're here. We have some deadlines, and I think obviously we'll have a last chance to discuss it the day we vote on it. Because it's going to be recommended by the roundtable, correct? And I know the process, and it comes here.
I guess I would hope if there's specific feedback that's really important that you think is missing, that we would know it before the roundtable.
Yeah.
So we could continue to make those changes all the way up.
And even the roundtable may make suggestions too, and we'll be continuing to redo things.
That's true, and that's the 21st, so we're not without any time here. So we'll get a document next week.
Our goal is the 16th.
Yes.
As the College of Committee panel will finish this Friday.
Andrea?
Okay, so you're releasing the next draft on what day?
16th is our goal.
To the board members.
The 16th?
And the roundtable.
And the roundtable. When will the public get it?
The public review is finished.
No, when will the public get a copy of the next draft?
After the adoption.
No, I'm saying, when will it be posted for public review?
The public review process is already done.
And when it will be posted for the public to look at it?
After it's adopted.
You're saying that we're going to have dramatically rewritten standards from what was presented to the public in February, and they're going to have no opportunity to review it.
Andrea, it's the process
That is not the process as I understand it.
It's the process that's been outlined in law. We had our 3 public hearings. We had an online input process. We've had experts give input process. We've had all the input to actually develop the standards. There's not a continuation of coming back to the public at some point. We've already gone through that process.
Well, I need to know what experts in the field of math and experts I trust and people I represent think before I can vote. I can make a determination on my own on the language arts, but I certainly need to consult with mathematicians before I vote on the math standards. And there are many people I think will need to see that draft at the exact same time it's released to the board. And I would like to move that the draft that's made available to the board be simultaneously made available to the public.
Andrea, we're not in an action. We don't have any action on this topic today. We don't have an action item on this topic today. I
thought we could make action items on any discussion item that was on the agenda.
Don't believe that's how we're operating in our board operating procedures. And that's why at the beginning of the meeting, we ask for any action items that need to be placed on the agenda.
Well, I tried to put one on, and I was told since it was a discussion item, I'd be fine.
I mean, it just seems to be a basic issue of transparency. I mean, no one's saying we need to have another public hearing, but all she seems to be asking is that people have opportunity to review what we're going to be asked to, vote upon. I'm not even comfortable at this close having not seen it. I don't know what the anchor standards are here. We've been operating under what to me is a total misconception that Indiana is some little educational island that can do its own thing without regard to what's going on in the rest of the world here. And quite frankly, I think we will pay a price if our anchor standards are not aligned with Common Core. Now, that's my personal belief, but at the same time, I feel that whatever it is we're going to be asked to adopt on April 29th should be made available to the public at the earliest convenience. Let's just put it out there and let people see it. I mean, what are we hiding?
Is there a reason why we wouldn't? Because, if they come to us as board members, then they're public records. So, I personally wouldn't have any objection to releasing those. I guarantee you somebody's going to get them if we get them. So I guess just to echo Tony's comments about transparency, I think it would be reasonable to make those, put those up online or release them in some other way.
Did you want to make a comment, Danielle?
Claire was just suggesting that on the website, I guess the CC website, that it has been mentioned that they could be put up for public comment.
What,
or not for public comment, just for
what I want to
review.
What I want to make sure is clear.
Yeah, because the goal we've been aiming for is to release the next official draft by the middle of next week.
Yes.
We said the 14th, 15th, sounds like 16th. Hopefully it'll be closer to the 15th.
We were actually hoping for the 14th. We were giving ourselves
so that the roundtable members have a chance to review it before the 21st.
Right.
And then at the same time, we would release the synthesis and the reports along with the next draft. And then that gives the State Board of Ed members enough time as well to review in advance of the roundtable as well as the actual board meeting on the 28th.
So Andrea, I'm not, the draft being available isn't the issue for me, okay? It's that we don't have there's not another mechanism for public input. So having them except at the board meeting on the 28th. We've dedicated that board meeting to the adoptions of standards and then the approval of those standards on that date. So making them available is one thing. Having another whole process for public input is quite another issue.
Well, they can certainly email us during that period. And I might point out that if they're testifying on the 28th, the roundtable will have already acted. And so the 28th is a little late for testimony, but at least they can email us, call us, communicate to us their concerns so that we can make an informed decision.
So we don't need any action in order to just post them on our website. So I just want to clarify, I wanted to be sure that there's not a formal process for more public input.
I understand that. So what I'm suggesting, and this was what I was suggesting when I began my questioning, is that the standards be posted for public access at the same time they're given to the board, and that there not be a day delay, because we can't delay a day. The time frame is so crunched as it is. That was all I was getting at.
Okay, and that's certainly fine. So we will post them when we give them to the roundtable and we give them to the board.
And our drop dead deadline for ourselves is the 16th.
Yeah. Oh, David?
Thanks for doing that. I think transparency is important. I want to get to another major comment that you made about the 28th. I don't intend to accept whatever recommendation comes forward, just carte blanche and vote for it as a consent agenda item.
Oh, no.
It's always,
no.
Well, the comment was made if we had comments to make, we should have made them along the way. That's never been the expectation.
Well, it's better if you do, so we can go ahead and make changes.
But the comment was made, we should have been making comments along the way. I felt that I should let the process play out and let those who are involved provide all the comment, then it comes to us. And I was expecting on the 28th that we would have a discussion.
We will.
And there would be opportunities for amendments and so forth and so on. I'm glad the superintendent is saying, yes, we will. Not that I want another long meeting, but it's so critical that we do that. And I would hope at that point that we have a rich discussion around these particular standards. And I'm reassured now the superintendent has said, yes, we will.
And I don't know if Dr. Oliver wants to give comment at this point. Because I just think of,
Brad?
I just think there was just a misunderstanding, because I think what I was hearing is we're not opening up for a public comment round, like a formal public comment, but it would naturally go out as a part of the agendas for both the roundtable and the board meeting. Mm-hmm. And it's a board meeting on the 28th, and I'm assuming the whole meeting, the reason I've carved off that day is to have a big conversation about standards.
I can tell you, given this process, and we've all watched these teams and the hours they've spent, the number of standards that you have to look at, I would hope you would have given a lot of time and thought to them before that. Just because I can't imagine that day for every thought you have on every discrete standard within every content. Across K-12, would there be time for that? So I guess all I'm saying is I would hope there'd be a lot of thought have already been given, and if there's things you want to see changed, that we have a chance to do that before we bring them forth.
Right. We value all the time that's put in here by staff and educators across the state and so forth and so on. That's not the point. The point is that there may be some philosophical or conceptual disagreements on particular components of it.
Absolutely.
And I have not talked to my colleagues on this board about it because I knew on the 28th we would have a broad discussion. And so I've seen that as the ultimate opportunity to have a broad-based discussion as well as to vote on it. And it's not to in any way provide negativity toward the process. It's to honor those who have spent their time. But on the other hand, we have a responsibility not to accept it carte blanche and just say, people worked on it, therefore
And I hope that's not what I'm
going
trying
to approve it.
I don't want you to think that's what I'm saying. I'm just wanting us to be able to continue with our goal, which is to get this to the educators before their summer vacation. I mean, all along we've said at every meeting, let's try to make sure our teachers go home this summer knowing what it is they're coming back to teach. So I guess if there are large philosophical debates or things we should be considering, that we are certainly dialoguing with each other, the sooner the better.
So a good review of the standards when they come out next week
Would be
is
excellent.
great.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So again, this just reiterates what I think I've already said, which is the College Inquiry Panel is coming back together on the 11th. I want to go to the next slide because the College Inquiry Panel actually has been heavily involved with the Commission for Higher Education. And they are going to be asked, because remember we have two kind of evaluation or approval processes. We have our State Education Roundtable and the State Board of Education, but then we also, because we are potentially having to showcase that these are deemed college inquiry ready in Indiana to the U.S. Department of Education, what did our process look like? So we are asking our College Inquiry Ready panel to identify which part of the standards, this is an example from English Language Arts, did they review and did they approve them? So we have some evidence to give to Commissioner Lubbers. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys can't.
You're looking at something, but we're not.
There we go, sorry. So Friday will be led by the Commission for Higher Education with our College Inquiry Ready panel to say, you have reviewed this, do you deem it College Inquiry Ready, and sign off on each one of them. And that's all.
Dan, did you have a comment?
Are we going to incorporate a little preamble or as suggested?
By Dr. Oliver.
You know, there was also a part here, and I've read through some of the testimony, I sat there, and I think by design we couldn't speak, but there was a conflating of a standard to methods to teaching materials. In other words, I think we ought to have a brief explanation. There's a standard, and what different people around the country use to teach that standard is a teacher decision and a principal and a teacher and a local board, et cetera. I thought that got all confused and started some people saying, my goodness, the material in these standards is going to be terrible for our children, when I think it was just a case of mistaken identity. They were talking about materials and curriculum and not a standard. Correct. So I would like some delineation of that because I think it's caused some...
Yes.
And frankly, I've appreciated the fact so many parents were interested in education. So I don't want to discourage that, but I thought sometimes we were talking oranges and apples in a few...
And I think that can be included, as you mentioned, in the preamble, but also in everything we do with architecture and articulation that goes forth. We want to definitely put out with our standards for the public consumption. We talked about that implementation idea, that differentiation between curriculum instruction and standards. I believe Michelle has a comment.
Michelle, did you have a comment?
I just want to offer a clarification. Based on a 2004 Attorney General opinion, it's my belief that the board has to take an up or down vote on the standards as they are recommended by the Education Roundtable. The Roundtable would have the opportunity to make modification, but this board, by my reading of that opinion, does not have that authority.
Oh.
Clarification, so if we want to make any kind of change to it, then we have to vote no. And what's the implications of voting no on the 28th?
Then our standards would continue to remain in this unclear state.
we would have...
Those were revoked by statute, weren't they?
No, they are not. The 2010 standards will be void once we approve new standards.
So then
we're operating under the Indiana academic standards. Common Core is obviously not in operation, so When I say they would remain in this unclear state, what I meant was what we would be transitioning to would remain unclear for schools.
Correct.
So would we be back to the 2010 Indiana standards if
Well,
we vote no? on the 20?
Presumably, what would happen is the Education Roundtable would have to meet yet again and offer up a new recommendation to the board. But again, the disadvantage of that would be that our practitioners would still not know what they were transitioning to.
Gordon? Oh, Andrea, sorry, I thought Gordon had his hand up.
Okay, so if we have to do an up or down vote, and we vote no, then we need a plan B. So as I've been suggesting all along, it would behoove us to submit our prior standards, 2000 math, 2006 English language arts, to the College and Career Ready panel for a college and career ready evaluation. So if we end up voting no on the proposed standards, we'll have those in our back pocket. And I've suggested all along it would be good to have that information. So I'd like to propose now that we go ahead and get that done in the meantime. We'd have a backup plan should we need it.
Andrea, we've already evaluated all of those standards within the process that we're doing right now. Michelle, if you could stay there right where you are. So I just want to be clear. The 1427, we are teaching standards right now. 1427 also says that we must have new standards adopted by July 2014. And so we have set our April 28th meeting to get that finished so that we can ensure that our teachers have the summer in which to look at their standards and begin to have planning for implementation. So comments, public comments, board comments, whatever, need to happen prior to the 21st. The roundtable may also give recommendations for some changes, of which may happen between the 21st and the 28th. You might get even another draft sent to you, but the process is pretty clear. It's a process that's been always used actually in standards. It goes to the roundtable. The roundtable makes the recommendation to the board. The board has a vote. I thought actually some changes could be made at that point, but you're letting me know that's not really how it works. So I guess we all know how important it is that we review these standards and get anything to you that from a board's perspective that we might want to do. So do we email Danielle directly or Molly?
That's what Molly and I was discussing. We'd be happy to have you directly email us the specific feedback.
So that can go, that can even, the career panel though will have finished its work by which date?
This Friday.
Okay, totally.
Totally. So what you will have seen, they will have signed off on. They will have deemed them to be what students in Indiana know and should be able to do to be college and career ready according to their lens.
So let me put one more thing here in the mix. Because if the roundtable makes changes, if there are more changes made after they have deemed college and career ready, there will have to be another meeting.
We've warned them of that.
Okay, so they know that.
We've actually warned the evaluation team and the College Career Ready panel team that some of the feedback through this, even after,
because we're not going to adopt standards that are not college and career ready.
Correct.
They must be. And that's the process by which they really get stamped with that little
And again, they've
mark.
been used to this differentiation. For example, geometry team had a WebEx this week because there was some more work to be done there. So it may be that there's one part of the College Career Ready panel, the entire panel. They are well aware that that could happen.
Did you also want to talk about mathematics courses while you were up here?
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes. So historically, when math standards have come before the Roundtable and the State Board of Education, they have been through algebra. We are bringing forth, based on the feedback from the educators, not just through algebra, but also 7 courses of mathematics, including finite, calculus, pre-calc. I don't have all my 7 in front of me, but I just want to make you aware when you receive your draft, because our educators felt strongly they needed the standards by course, as well as some of the feedback we received, you will get those in addition beyond the algebra standards.
And we had several of that testimony that happened at the hearings regarding that aspect.
Thank you for that reminder.
Okay, thank you.